When a tech billionaire's empire nearly crumbled because of a simple computer glitch, he never expected salvation to come from the janitor he'd walk past every day for 3 years. What Marcus did next didn't just save the company, it changed everything about how success is measured. Before we dive into this incredible story, drop a comment and tell us, what's the most unexpected help you've ever received from someone you underestimated? The 42nd floor of the Pinnacle Tower buzzed with the usual chaos of Silicon Valley success. Glass walls reflected the glow of endless monitors, and the air hummed with the electricity of a tech empire worth $12 billion. But inside the corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, David Chen sat frozen in front of his computer screen, watching his world fall apart one pixel at a time. "No, no, no," David muttered, his usually perfectly styled hair now disheveled from running his fingers through it. The presentation that would determine his company's future, a deal worth $200 million, was trapped inside a computer that had decided to mock him with an endless loading screen. His heart pounded as he stared at the spinning wheel of death, knowing that in exactly 47 minutes he'd be standing in front of investors who could either make or break everything he'd built. David Chen had always prided himself on being 3 steps ahead of everyone else. At 35, he'd built Technova from a garage startup into a global powerhouse, earning him a spot on magazine covers and conference stages worldwide. His suits were custom-tailored, his cars were imported, and his penthouse overlooked the bay. But right now, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the frozen screen mocking him with its stubborn silence. "Sarah," he called out to his assistant, his voice cracking with desperation. "Get IT up here now! I don't care if you have to drag them from their lunch break!" Sarah's voice crackled through the intercom, tinged with panic. "Sir, the entire IT department is at the tech conference in Austin. They won't be back until tomorrow morning." David's stomach dropped. He'd approved that conference trip himself, never imagining he'd need them today. His fingers flew across the keyboard, trying every trick he'd learned in his early coding days, but the computer remained stubbornly frozen. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he watched the clock tick away precious minutes. That's when he heard the gentle knock on his office door. "Excuse me, Mr. Chen." David looked up to see a man in his 50s standing in the doorway wearing a navy blue maintenance uniform with Marcus embroidered on the chest pocket. David recognized him vaguely. The guy who emptied trash cans and cleaned the offices after hours. His dark skin showed the kind of weathered patience that comes from years of honest work, and his eyes held a warmth that seemed out of place in the sterile corporate environment. "I'm sorry, but I'm dealing with a crisis here," David said, barely looking up from his screen. "Whatever cleaning needs to be done can wait." Marcus Johnson stepped closer, his worn work boots silent on the polished floor. "I couldn't help but overhear your computer trouble, sir. Mind if I take a look?" David's first instinct was to say no. This was Marcus, the janitor, the guy who collected coffee cups and emptied recycling bins. What could he possibly know about enterprise-level computer systems? But another minute ticked by on the clock. Desperation began to override his assumptions. "Look, Marcus, I appreciate the offer, but this is incredibly complex corporate software. I need actual IT professionals, not—" David caught himself before finishing that sentence, but the implication hung in the air between them. Marcus nodded slowly, his expression unchanged. "I understand, Mr. Chen, but sometimes the simplest problems have the simplest solutions. Would it hurt to let me try?" David's hands trembled as he stared at the screen. 39 minutes until his presentation. His entire company's future balanced on a knife's edge, and his pride was the only thing standing between him and potential help. The internal battle raged in his mind, years of believing that success was measured by titles and corner offices versus the growing reality that he was completely out of options. "Fine," David said finally, stepping back from his chair, "but please be careful. If this gets any worse—" Marcus approached the computer with the kind of calm confidence that comes from experience. He didn't rush or frantically click buttons like David had been doing. Instead, he stood quietly for a moment, studying the screen with the same focused attention he brought to every task, whether it was fixing a broken printer or unclogging a drain. Tell me exactly what happened, Marcus said, his voice steady and reassuring. David found himself explaining the morning's events, how he'd been making final adjustments to the presentation, how the system had suddenly frozen, and how every restart attempt had failed. As he spoke, he noticed something unexpected. Marcus was listening, really listening, not prejudging him or letting the perceived gulf in status interrupt the exchange of information.
Not just waiting for his turn to speak or dismissing his concerns, but absorbing every detail with genuine attention. "And you said this presentation is," Marcus asked. David blinked in surprise. "You know about Morrison Industries?" A small smile played at the corners of Marcus's mouth. "Mr. Shen, I've been cleaning these offices for 3 years. I hear things, I see things, and I pay attention." He paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "More importantly, I know computers." There was something in Marcus's tone that made David really look at him for the first time. Beyond the maintenance uniform and the weathered hands, he saw intelligence in those dark eyes, a quiet confidence that spoke of knowledge and experience. "Before I try anything," Marcus continued, "I need to know, is this presentation saved anywhere else? Any backups?" David's heart sank. In his rush to make last-minute changes, he had been working directly on the server file. "No," he admitted. "I was making real-time edits. If we lose this—" "We won't," Marcus said simply. "But I need you to trust me." Trust. Such a simple word, yet it felt monumental in that moment. David had built his career on trusting only himself, on believing that success meant never showing vulnerability. But here he was, about to hand over control of his company's future to a man he had walked past countless times without even acknowledging. Marcus's fingers moved across the keyboard with surprising precision. He navigated through system diagnostics with the fluidity of someone who'd done this many times before. David watched in growing amazement as Marcus bypassed security protocols he didn't even know existed, accessing hidden system files with the skill of a seasoned IT professional. "How do you—" David began, but Marcus held up a gentle hand. "Patience, Mr. Chen. The computer is talking to me. I just need to listen." For the next 10 minutes, David watched Marcus work with a level of expertise that shattered every assumption he held. This wasn't luck or simple troubleshooting. This was deep, technical knowledge being applied with surgical precision. His hands moved with the confidence of someone who understood not just what to do, but why to do it. "There," Marcus said finally, stepping back from the computer. "Try it now." David approached his desk with held breath. The screen flickered once, twice, then suddenly burst to life. Not only was his presentation intact, but the system was running smoother than it had in months. Every file, every graphic, every carefully crafted slide, all of it was there, perfect and ready. I don't understand," David stammered. "How did you—" Marcus began gathering his cleaning supplies, his expression humble despite what he'd just accomplished. 23 years in IT before I took this job, Mr. Chen. Started as a programmer, worked my way up to senior systems architect, built networks for companies about this size." The revelation hit David like a physical blow. "Then why are you—" "Cleaning offices?" Marcus finished with a knowing smile. "Life happens, Mr. Chen. Company downsizing, age discrimination, a few bad breaks. Sometimes the world decides your experience isn't worth what it used to be. But skills don't disappear just because the business card changes." David stared at this man who had just saved his company, really seeing him for the first time. The quiet dignity, the patient wisdom, the incredible competence. It had all been there, walking past his office every day, invisible to him, because it came wrapped in a maintenance uniform instead of a tailored suit. Marcus, David's voice caught. I owe you an apology and a debt I can never repay. You don't owe me anything, Marcus replied, shouldering his supply bag. Just remember this moment, Mr. Chen. Sometimes the help we need comes from places we don't expect. As Marcus headed toward the door, David's mind raced. In 22 minutes, he'd be delivering the presentation that would secure his company's future. But suddenly, the presentation felt less important than the man walking away from him. Marcus, wait. David's voice stopped him at the doorway. Can we talk? After my presentation, I mean? Really talk. Marcus turned back, and for the first time, David saw hope flicker in his eyes. I'd like that, Mr. Chen. The presentation went flawlessly. David stood before the Morrison Industries board with confidence restored, knowing every slide would advance perfectly, every graphic would display clearly. But throughout the entire presentation, his mind kept drifting to the man who had made it all possible. 2 hours later, David found Marcus in the building's small employee break room, sitting alone with a cup of coffee and a well-worn paperback book. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows, making the space feel cramped and uninviting compared to the executive floors above.
Mind if I join you? David asked, carrying his own cup of coffee, not the premium blend from his office, but the standard break room coffee that Marcus drank every day. Marcus gestured to the empty chair across from him. How did the presentation go? We got the deal, David said, but there was no triumph in his voice. $200 million, biggest contract in company history. Congratulations, Marcus said, and his smile was genuine. Your company deserves that success. I've watched you build something remarkable here. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. David leaned forward, his voice intense. Why didn't you ever tell me about your background, your experience? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of years of disappointment. Would you have believed me, Mr. Chen? If the janitor had walked into your office and claimed to be a former systems architect, would you have taken him seriously? The question hung in the air like a challenge. David wanted to say yes, but honesty demanded a different answer. Probably not, he admitted. I would have thought you were trying to get something from me. Exactly, Marcus said softly. I learned a long time ago that people see what they expect to see. A black man in a maintenance uniform must be uneducated, unskilled, maybe even dangerous. It's easier to just do my job and go home than to constantly fight those assumptions. David felt something crack open inside his chest. That's not fair. That's not right. Fair isn't part of the equation. It's just reality. I've made peace with it. Well, I haven't, David said, his voice growing stronger, and I'm not going to. Over the next hour, David listened as Marcus told his story. How he'd started coding in the 1980s, teaching himself programming languages on borrowed computers. How he'd worked his way through college, earning a computer science degree while supporting his family. How he'd built a successful career, designing systems for major corporations, mentoring young programmers, leading teams of skilled professionals. Then came the downturn, the company restructuring that eliminated his position, the months of interviews where he was told he was overqualified or not the right fit, the gradual erosion of his savings as he took temporary jobs to pay his bills, the eventual acceptance that pride couldn't feed his family, and sometimes any honest work was better than no work at all. I've been at Teknova for 3 years, Marcus said.
I've watched this company grow, seen the challenges you faced. I've wanted to help, to contribute more than just keeping the offices clean. But I also knew that crossing those lines could cost me the job I have." David sat in silence, absorbing the weight of Marcus's words. He thought about all the times he'd passed Marcus in the hallway without acknowledgement, all the moments when incredible talent had been invisible to him because it didn't fit his narrow definition of what success looked like. "I have a proposition. Actually, no, I have an offer, a job offer." Marcus looked up sharply. "Mr. Chen, I appreciate the gesture, but I don't need charity." "This isn't charity," David said firmly. "This is business, the smartest business decision I could make." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I want to offer you the position of Chief Technology Officer, full authority over all IT operations, system architecture, and technology strategy. Starting salary, $400,000, plus equity options." Marcus's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. "Mr. Chen, you can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." David's voice carried absolute conviction. "You just saved my company with skills I didn't even know existed in this building. You understand our systems better than anyone, and you've been observing our operations for 3 years. You know our challenges, our weaknesses, our potential." "But the board, the investors," Marcus protested. "We'll see results," David interrupted. "I don't care about their initial reactions. I care about performance, and I just watched you perform at a level that justifies every penny of that salary." Marcus was quiet for a long time, his weathered hands wrapped around his coffee cup. "What about the rest of your staff, the other executives? They're not going to accept a janitor walking into the C-suite." "Then they'll learn," David said simply, "the same way I did, through your work, your results, your leadership." He paused. "Marcus, I'm not offering you this job because I feel guilty. I'm offering it because you're the best person for it. Today proved that beyond any doubt." The transformation wasn't immediate, and it wasn't easy. When David announced Marcus's promotion at the next company meeting, the room fell silent. Some faces showed surprise, others skepticism, a few barely concealed hostility. But David stood firm, outlining Marcus's qualifications, his experience, and his vision for the company's technological future. Within weeks, Marcus began implementing changes that revolutionized Technova's operations. He streamlined systems that had been running inefficiently for years, identified security vulnerabilities that could have cost millions, and designed new protocols that increased safety.
Productivity across every department. His quiet leadership style, so different from the aggressive culture that had dominated the company, began to create a more collaborative environment. But the real transformation wasn't just in the systems, it was in the people. Marcus made time for every employee, from senior developers to entry-level support staff. He listened to their ideas, valued their contributions, and created an atmosphere where talent was recognized regardless of its packaging. "You know what I learned from you?" David said one evening as they worked late on a new project. "I learned that I'd been measuring success by all the wrong metrics. Title, salary, office size. None of that matters if you can't see the value in people." Marcus smiled, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he fine-tuned a complex algorithm. "We all have blind spots, Mr. Chen. The important thing is what we do when we start to see clearly." The impact extended far beyond Technova's walls. Word spread through the tech industry about the janitor who became a CTO, but more importantly, about the CEO who had the courage to recognize talent wherever it existed. Other companies began examining their own assumptions about hiring and promotion. Marcus started speaking at conferences, sharing his story, and challenging audiences to look beyond their preconceptions. 6 months after the computer crisis, Technova had its most profitable quarter in company history. The Morrison Industries deal had just been the beginning. Marcus's technological improvements had attracted new clients, improved efficiency, and created innovations that set the company apart from its competitors. But for David, the real transformation wasn't just in the systems, it was personal. He no longer walked past employees without acknowledgement. He learned names, asked about families, and made time for conversations that had nothing to do with business metrics. He discovered that the security guard was a published poet, that the receptionist had a master's degree in psychology, and that the cafeteria manager had run her own restaurant for 15 years. I was so focused on climbing the ladder that I forgot to look around and see who was already there with me, David reflected during one of his and Marcus's regular coffee conversations. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Success isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being smart enough to recognize when someone else is. The story of David and Marcus became something of a legend at Technova, told to new employees as an example of the company's values. But it also became something more, a reminder that kindness isn't just about grand gestures or dramatic rescues. Sometimes, the most profound kindness is simply seeing people as they really are, acknowledging their worth and giving them the opportunity to contribute their gifts. As David stood in his office 1 year later, looking out at the city skyline, he thought about that desperate moment when his computer had frozen and his world had seemed to collapse. He had been so focused on the crisis that he had nearly missed the miracle. Not the technical rescue, but the human connection that had changed everything. The real transformation hadn't been in the software or the systems. It had been in learning to see past uniforms and titles, past assumptions and prejudices, to recognize the incredible potential that exists in every person. Marcus had saved more than just a computer that day. He'd saved David from a narrow vision of success that would have cost him far more than any business deal. Their partnership had become one of the most successful in the company's history, but more than that, it had become a friendship built on mutual respect, shared values, and the understanding that true success is measured not by what we achieve for ourselves, but by what we help others achieve. The computer that had once seemed broken had simply needed someone who knew how to listen to what it was trying to say. And David had learned that the same was true for people. Sometimes the most valuable voices are the ones we haven't been listening to, the ones we've overlooked because they don't sound like what we expected success to sound like. In the end, Marcus had fixed more than just a computer. He had fixed a perspective, a company culture, and a life that had been running on systems that no longer served their purpose. And David had learned that the most incredible skill isn't technical knowledge or business acumen. It's the ability to see past the surface and recognize the extraordinary potential that exists in ordinary moments, in unexpected places, and in people who are just waiting for someone to notice what they have to offer.